Welcome to another edition of the Fieldhouse Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. I'm here with managing editor of the Fieldhouse, Seth Davis. It is our weekly Sunday podcast with the man in charge of the Fieldhouse. How's it going, man?
Going great, man. Craziness. I'm afraid to look at my phone first thing in the morning. It's going to go off that we have to react to.
My exact process on Friday, because we're going to talk about the scandal stuff at the top, and then we'll get into what happened the rest of the weekend, really, in the second half of the podcast. What happened on Friday with me was I wake up early. Like I wake up at like 7:30. I was up at 6:45 on Friday just because I happened to wake up. And I look at my phone. I'm just like, why do I have so many text messages? Why is Dana, Brian?
So people know you're on the West Coast. So early for you is later in the morning for the East Coast crowd, and I was on the East Coast this week. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just like looking. I'm just like, why is Dana and Brian and I have CL here, and then we have Seth is like going back and forth. What is going on? And I look at my text and I scroll up to the top immediately, and Dana has linked us immediately the Yahoo Sports report saying that. I guess that the way to put it is that this scandal, due to the connection with ASM and Andy Miller, will spread all throughout college basketball, essentially. We had names such as Miles Bridges. We had names such as Chimezie Metu out here at USC. A couple of Kentucky and Duke kids were named, although I'm a little bit skeptical to say their names because I'm not a huge fan of the way that was handled. There's a lot going on here. This whole deal is happening, and at the center of it seems to be Arizona now, because on Friday night, Mark Schlabach at ESPN reported that Sean Miller is now on a wiretap, having discussed with Christian Dawkins paying $100,000 to DeAndre Ayton. My initial response to that was that $100,000 seems not nearly expensive enough for DeAndre Ayton. But what was your initial reaction to everything that went down over the course of Friday?
Well, as I wrote later in the day, I mean, it is a very small peek into this world, and it's a world that certainly we all know has existed, and these transactions and these relationships have been going on. But to see it spelled out in black and white is pretty stark. And we have a couple of different things going on. I mean, first of all, I think it's important to note that what Pete Thamel and Pat Forty reported for Yahoo was the documentation that Christian Dawkins provided to ASM and Andy Miller for his expense reports.
Right.
And so, just because he writes in an expense report that he gave $400 to Miles Bridges' mom doesn't mean that happened. They did not mention in the story that Christian Dawkins got fired and essentially disbarred as an agent for falsifying running up on a client's credit card $42,000 in expenses on Uber. Think about how hard it would be to spend $42,000 on Uber. I mean, I don't know if he's driving to Alaska, but anyway. Yeah, so
my man had $42,000 worth of Uber charges on Elfrid Payton's credit card. That is incredible.
Incredible. So. So it is certainly conceivable that he's filing an expense report that's not altogether accurate. So I think that's what, these schools have had to do in terms of scrambling back and going back to the players involved. And, and in most cases, especially with regards to the current players, the dollar amounts were so minuscule that even if it were true, it would really come down to, giving the money to charity and maybe sitting a game or two at most. So, this idea that, this single expense report from a sketchy individual as a part of a larger case is going to torch the NCAA tournament, and lots of kids are going to sit out. It's just too much of a stretch right now. Now this is barring other information coming out.
Can we talk about the expense report aspect of this real quick too? Yeah, because I was not a huge fan of the fact that players like Kevin Knox and Wendell Carter and Malcolm Brogdon were named in this report, tying them to this scandal, because what we see here is Christian Dawkins' half of the expense report. We don't actually see that Wendell Carter's mom allowed Christian Dawkins to pay for this meal. You know what I mean? And I think it's stated within the article that it stands to reason that this was paid for on both parties. I mean, maybe they have that reporting, but they didn't really say that in the article, and I was not a huge fan of that.
Well, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it was huge news. This was part of the discovery process. And so, it's kind of, I hate to make these analogies, but it's not like these people are the victims of a crime necessarily, where you're hiding the name of an accuser, perhaps. It was quite newsworthy that they were in those expense reports. It was just I think the widespread expectation that all these players would be immediately be declared ineligible for the tournament.
Right.
That wasn't quite spelled out in the article, but that was certainly, part of the main reaction. And it also, in all fairness, extends to the Sean Miller evidence of, him talking in a wiretap with Christian Dawkins, who really wasn't, from my understanding, was not involved in Ayton's recruitment. And the timing of this, the conversation happened well after Ayton had already signed a letter of intent. So why Sean Miller is talking to Christian Dawkins about getting money to DeAndre Ayton after he's already signed, when Dawkins wasn't really a big part of his recruitment. I mean, there's a lot of holes in that, but obviously there was enough there for Sean not to coach on Saturday night. I thought it very salient in his statement where he says, "I'm confident I'll be vindicated," but by the same token, he doesn't say that it's not true. He doesn't say that wasn't me on the wiretap. He doesn't say I didn't say that. He didn't even say that I didn't give him money. He just said I'll be vindicated. Well, what does that mean? Why can't you go further than that? And if it's true, why are you not coaching? But then why is Ayton playing? I mean, it's a big muddle, and we're getting bits and pieces of information coming through the media, so it becomes even harder to suss everything out.
Well, so I had a conversation with Jeff Eisenberg at Yahoo yesterday about that. He asked me a similar question. Does it strike you as weird that DeAndre Ayton is playing but Sean Miller is not coaching? And it really didn't strike me as all that weird, because the way that they formed the idea of Sean Miller not coaching yesterday was that it was for the best of the university that he not coach. And I think at the end of the day, what happened was they realized we don't want to have Sean Miller out in front of the media after this game, having to get a barrage of questions about his involvement that he really can't answer, only due to the legal process, let alone due to the fact that he's still formulating how he wants to handle all of this. So I wasn't surprised there. And then in addition, with DeAndre Ayton playing, I guess that what it came down to for me was I've heard the same things that you have in terms of who DeAndre Ayton was involved with. And I had never heard the name Christian Dawkins being involved with DeAndre Ayton until Friday. And I guess that my thing is with him, if DeAndre Ayton was just being, used as a pawn by Christian Dawkins to try and get money, and DeAndre Ayton had no knowledge of that and was not being paid or anything like that, I'm not clear on what his crime is there. You know what I mean? Like he's just being used within it.
Yeah, and I don't really know, if someone's giving Ayton's mother money, let's say, and he doesn't know about it or never saw any of that, I honestly don't know if that necessarily compromises his eligibility. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily that gets you out of everything if it goes to a family member and not you. I mean, if someone's paying your mother, then it's considered being paid to the player. So I don't know. Like I said, information is so sketchy right now.
Right.
And of course, as of this recording, this might change by the time the podcast posts. We don't know how long Sean Miller's not going to be coaching Arizona. I mean, do they make a determination that he should be coaching? Then it's hard to conceive, but this time yesterday it was hard to conceive that DeAndre Ayton was going to play. So we're all kind of fumbling in the dark here.
Yeah, and I think Arizona's board of directors even released a statement yesterday saying, given media reports, we have sought legal advice based on what is happening here, and we are committed to all of the standards that the NCAA says, et cetera, et cetera. But it seems like they're even in the dark on a lot of this. So if they're in the dark and we're all in the dark, it all stands to reason that this is still going to play out over the course of the coming weeks, months, etc. You got a chance to talk to Mark Emmert yesterday on camera, and you got a chance to speak with him a bit off camera, obviously. I think that the biggest maybe wave that he made within your interview with him on CBS was whenever he mentioned that it might be worth re-exploring the idea of agents being involved with basketball players and, football players. I think it stands to reason should be included in this as well. But given the fact that hockey players and other sports can have agents, it might be worth exploring representation options for players in the future. What did you kind of gain from that interview, and what did you gain from his answer there in particular?
Well, both in the interview that everybody saw in our studio, and then also in my more private conversations with him, in the hallways, so spending a couple hours with him, I think he has a very high aspiration and very real intention to see some strong changes made in terms of the agent area in college basketball. Very strong changes, and also implemented very quickly, as in before the start of next season, which, by the way, would be a different kind of rules-making process. Normally they pass the rules by the whole membership at their convention, but that convention took place in January. So they have a board of directors meeting, and then a board of governors meeting in August. That he hopes that these reforms are written up, passed by the board of governors, and then basically sent to the membership to be rubber stamped, and they would only not go into place if someone in the membership vetoed it. So it's a little bit of a different process, but it definitely expedites and circumvents and gives them the option of putting these in place by the start of next season. And also having, kind of sniffed around what his Commission on College Basketball has been talking about, they have focused very much on the agent thing. It is true, a lot of people probably don't realize this, that in baseball and hockey, college athletes are allowed to have professional relationships with agents. However, they are not allowed to sign with agents, and they are not allowed to take any money from agents. I think it's very possible that not only will college basketball players be able to formulate more professional, above-board, conversations with agents, if not outwardly signing by them, but that there might be room for financial transactions to take place as long as they're in the form of a loan. That it is possible that an agent could give a high school player or a college player a loan, and as long as it's the proper paperwork, and that player and that family has to pay the agent back at some point, or not, whatever the rules of that transaction would be, that as long as it's above board and transparent, that could take place. I mean, that's a seismic change in the way the NCAA has been doing business in terms of college basketball, and by extension college football. So, and then there's the question about, whether they can open up the ancillary marketing space, if it's local merchants, or trading in your likeness, or, being able to get money for an autograph show, or what have you. That there's a possibility to really open that up. So, I do think that out of the ashes of what's happening here, that there can be some real meaningful form. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to go to the wild, wild west, free-for-all, where anybody who wants to give anybody anything for whatever reason is able to do that. Some people have tried to make the argument that should be the case. It certainly would help in the losing effort to enforce the rules, because if you don't have rules to enforce, then it's not hard to enforce them. So that's your prohibition model, which, say, well, we might want these things to be illegal, but the fact is we don't have the ability to enforce these rules, and therefore let's just get rid of them. So somewhere through all of this, I think a new framework is going to emerge and be implemented in place by the start of next season. And like I say, based on being around Mark Emmert for a few hours yesterday, I think he's trying to seize this moment and really trying to push these things through, which would be, I think, quite significant.
Yeah, I think it's important that we get to the point where this ends up being the case in college basketball, because it would at the very least limit the idea of the underground marketplace that currently inhabits the entirety of the sport, right? Being able to at least make money off of your likenesses and off of your brand is kind of a no-brainer to me. What are some of the pitfalls that you see that could occur there?
Well, again, unless you're going to say everything goes, if you have any type of restriction on financial wherewithal, you're going to have cheating. Okay, so that's why we can talk about the one and done. That's a whole separate thing. I mean, the one and done has been great for college basketball because it's put the DeAndre Aytons and Marvin Bagleys in college for a year. I'm in favor of getting rid of it because I don't think it's very fair. But this is just not about the one and done, because even the kids who are coming to college, people are always going to want more money. That's the bottom line.
Right.
They're going to be players who are not good enough to enter the draft, but they're going to be in college, and they're going to have a chance to make money that they're not allowed to take, and they're going to grab it because it's money. Okay.
Right. And I don't mean to accuse anyone when I bring up this name, for instance. I have no idea if he took money, didn't take money, whatever. But Jalen Brunson was a player that nobody considered was a potential player who could go to the NBA immediately, right? Jalen Brunson was always going to be a highly sought-after commodity in college basketball. Just wherever he went, he was always going to be a highly sought-after commodity, to the point where there could be people around him that wanted to get paid for him. Now, I don't know what happened there. I don't know if anything happened there. I would say probably nothing did happen, given the fact that he has not come up in this. But someone like that, a player like that was a top 20 recruit in his class, is always going to be valuable.
Well, I think, look, the answer to a lot of this question of why don't they do this, because they don't want to be in that business. So you ask the pitfalls. You get boosters involved, and you're coming here. Hey, I got a guy who'll give you 100,000. Come here. Well, no, I got a guy who'll give you 150,000. Come here. They just don't want to be in that business, and I don't necessarily blame them for that. But they can, I think, devise a world, and people like to apply the Olympic model on that in terms of being able to make marketing income or be professional outside of the Olympics. But the Olympics don't recruit. So that's an imperfect application. I mean, college sports doesn't exist anywhere else on planet Earth.
Yeah.
So there's no template for how to go about this. But you can devise a world where you're opening a lot of this up and bringing shedding light on the darkness without having to take the step of the schools paying these folks as professionals. I mean, if you're going to play for our college, you should still have to go to class, and you should still have to be a student and all those other things. But the idea of what you do on your own time outside of this realm, clearly they have to modernize. There's nobody at the wheel. There's no commissioner of college basketball, and we say this all the time, and no real meaningful change ever gets made because until there's a crisis. Well, guess what? We have a crisis, and I think out of this crisis, I think there's going to be a new paradigm, hopefully by the start of next season, and then let's just see where we are with everything.
Yeah, I mean, how quickly they get this done is a significant question to me, and I have no idea how that is even going to work. I guess that the last question that I'm going to bring up here is something that I'm sure you can't answer, something that I definitely can't answer yet. What do we think even happens with punishment in this scenario where the entirety of this scandal has spread to all of the reaches of college basketball now? It certainly seems like there are specific schools that have not gotten any sort of, statement of involvement within this scandal, but it's pretty clear that this is a widespread issue in college basketball. How do you even go about enforcing some of the rules here whenever you're talking about what I would say 70% of high major schools at some point, maybe more, are going to be involved?
Well, again, that's kind of guesswork. It's really not hard to come up with the answer of how to enforce the rules, but first you need the good information, right? So I was interested, in talking to Mark Emmert, and he mentioned this on the air. They're actually in pretty consistent contact with the FBI. I really didn't realize that. They are consistently talking to the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York, Southern District of New York about, can you give us what you have? So, it's still unclear to me exactly what laws have been broken here. I mean, that's not my area of expertise, but it's not unclear to me what rules have been broken. But again, Sam, a lot of this depends on dollar amounts. If we're talking about a couple hundred here and there, it's just not going to be that big of a deal. Even in retrospect, the largest dollar amount I think was Dennis Smith at NC State, $42,000. If that's the case, I'm sure NC State fans are heartbroken at the idea of having their 2016-17 season vacated. I
think they would prefer it.
Yeah, they're looking for. There is what they call a matrix, which is supposedly this top secret thing, which annoys me. I made the argument that it should be made public about, certain dollar amounts and certain benefits correlate to certain punishments, and anything below $1,000 is just not going to be that big of a deal. Yeah. When you get to four figures, you're starting to talk about a little bit of a bigger deal. And when you get that fifth figure, now you're talking about a really big deal. So, this case is going to take, a good 2 years to play itself out. So it may be 2 years before the NCAA really has solid information that they can act on. So everybody just take a chill pill, take a deep breath, and it's going to be a while.
From that long-term view all the way to the short term, let's talk about what happened on the floor yesterday in college basketball. I think the biggest story was probably Kansas beating Texas Tech and clinching at least a share of the Big 12. That's 14 straight years where Bill Self and Kansas has won a share of the Big 12. I'm pretty shocked that this is happening this year. I will be honest with you. I thought, right around, well, I would say early to mid-January, I did not think we'd be sitting in a situation where Kansas has the league locked up with 2 games left in the schedule. What was your takeaway from this incredible, victory and incredible run to the top of the league again for Kansas?
Well, first of all, let's understand, and listen, I'm amazed that you are, and 14 in a row is incredible. We can talk about how incredible it is and why. But it was aided and abetted by the injury to Keenan Evans. So he hurt his toe, and he's the senior guard at Texas Tech. Was on his way to being Big 12 Player of the Year, I think. Hurts his toe early in the second half at Baylor. They end up losing that game by a point or two. It was a real close game on the road. And then he played against Oklahoma State. They lost. He played against Kansas. They lost. I think he was. I have to look again. Maybe 1 for 15 in those 2 games, something along those lines. I mean, he is not himself.
No,
not himself. So you have to wonder if Keenan Evans doesn't get hurt. Are we still talking about Kansas as the Big 12 champ? But that aside, in an era where there's such incredible roster turnover with young underclassmen turning pro, and Kansas has lost as many as any program, maybe besides Kentucky, in terms of underclassmen leaving, and then 600 players transferring every year. This particular team lost their starting power forward and their top recruit, who's an NBA player, and Billy Preston. Didn't have him for a game, and supposedly the league was so great. The Big 12 was this great league, and so if it's not going to happen this year, you wonder if it's ever going to happen in our in our lifetime. So all credit to Bill Self, what he's done with his team. He's changed the way they've played. Normally he was one of the last guys to play the 2 bigs in the post, and he lost a couple of bigs, and they went small and playing 4 guards and still winning that way. So it's just a really an amazing achievement.
Yeah, the fact that they are able to do this is just totally crazy to me. You look at what is currently on this roster right now, just from a scholarship perspective, right? Before we even get into a talent perspective. So Charlie Moore, Dedrick Lawson, and KJ Lawson. Is KJ Lawson going there? Yeah, KJ Lawson's going there. So that's 3 guys that they have sitting out already. Billy Preston was, supposed to be there, and he ends up not being there due to a, mysterious car wreck that I don't know that we'll ever get the details on. That's 4 scholarships gone. Sam Cunliffe ends up just getting there midway through the year this year and ends up not being really all that useful to Kansas, I think we can say. That's 5 gone. And then Silvio D'Souza, they had a scholarship open. He comes in and takes that scholarship. He hasn't been useful yet. So that is essentially 6 scholarships being used by players or pieces that either can't be used in the case of the redshirt transfers, or that just haven't been able to be used either due to ineligibility or just lack of usefulness as they get acclimated to Kansas. So they have 7 scholarship players right now, and they are still finding a way to do this. And they're doing it, and this is a point I made with CJ Moore, they're doing it essentially without what I would consider a surefire top 40 pick in the NBA draft. I think Svi could get there if a team wants to stash a player. I think Devontae Graham might get there at some point, but the fact that they're doing this without a top 40 pick in the NBA draft right now potentially is even more bananas. I can't remember a Bill Self team that didn't have that level of player on it.
Yeah, there's certainly no Josh Jackson, or somebody of that ilk. There's not even a Frank Mason on this team. So, no, and again, he's adjusted the way that he's played. I don't know that it's necessarily the toughest team that he's ever had. Svi's had a great year. He's really awesome. I've been skeptical on him, but that shows what happens when you get a little bit older. And Graham, was the Robin to Frank Mason's Batman, and he's been able to make that transition. That doesn't always happen. So it was kind of touch and go there for a while, but you can't argue with 14 in a row.
From one streak continuing to another streak likely ending this week, Villanova's streak atop the Big East is probably going to end this week. Xavier is sitting currently at 13-3 in the league. Villanova at 12-4. Xavier has 2 games coming up this week against Providence at home, DePaul on the road. They will be prohibitive favorites in both of those games. The reason Villanova is in this position right now is because they fell in overtime at Creighton 89-83 on Saturday. It took a pretty tremendous little run at the end to get them to where they were even in this game, to have a chance to win it at the end. What do we think of Villanova right now? I'm a little bit more skeptical than I've been at any point in the season on them right now.
I agree. I don't like the way their personality has evolved around the three-point shot. I just think, at some point in that tournament, everybody has a bad shooting day. And so when I look for teams that I might want to jump on and pick to go to the Final Four or win the whole thing, I look for teams that can survive a bad shooting night. And I'm just not sure that they can. I just think their personality, this is not a great defensive team by any stretch. And so, not only are they looking to outscore you, but a lot of it's come from behind the three-point line. And that's not necessarily what we thought about over the years for Villanova basketball. Now, you look at their percentages, obviously they shoot it great, and they have multiple guys, including their big man Spellman, who hit a pair of three-pointers in the loss to Creighton.
Yep.
But as a team, they go 12 for 39. And believe me, it's not because Creighton's this great lockdown perimeter defensive team. I mean,
I will say, Kyrie Thomas is probably the best perimeter defender, at least in the top 3 in the country.
No question.
Really good.
Yeah. You've been on him I give you credit. You've been on him from the beginning. But as a team, and of course they lost Crumple, their best big man. So yeah. I mean, I think Villanova, for much of the season, really kind of distinguished itself from a lot of other teams in the country, and now I think they are in a very, very large group of teams where you say, hey, if they're making shots, they can beat anybody, and if they're not making shots, they can lose to a lot of teams, and I'm not sure that's a great way to go into the tournament. And maybe they get hot. It's really about that second weekend, especially where you got to beat 2 really good teams in 3 days. Everybody's mentally and physically beat up at that point in the season. You got to have toughness. You got to defend. You got to rebound. You got to be able to get to the foul line if your shots aren't falling. So I don't know. They could certainly win the whole thing, but in my view, the bloom is off the rose because I think stylistically they painted themselves into a corner, and I'm not sure at this late stage they can get out of it.
Yeah, no, the thing that scares me with them is the defense, as you mentioned. You have to be able to shut down opposing teams. You have to be able to at least slow them down. And I know that Phil Booth and Eric Paschal play a significant role in that, and they're finally back, and they looked a little bit better defensively yesterday, I thought. But I still just don't trust this team defensively in the way I need to whenever, as you mentioned, they are as, 3-point oriented as they are. Now, that type of style does not bother me necessarily, as long as you back it up with the kind of defense that Villanova in the past has been able to show that it can play. Right now, I'm skeptical that they can reach that level. Let's bounce around a little bit more here. I guess that the next place to go for me is probably going to be Kentucky. They've now won 3 in a row. Alabama, Arkansas, Missouri. They have a home game against Mississippi and a road game against Florida to close it up next week. They're sitting at 20-9. I think they're in a really solid position heading into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and it was not too long ago where the sky was completely falling and the bottom was falling out, to mix my metaphors, and they had lost 4 in a row and really should have lost to Vanderbilt at home. They ended up squeaking that out in overtime, so it should have been 5 in a row. But I think a couple of things are happening with them. I think, first of all, they are getting some roster stability, and they bring in Jared Vanderbilt, and I think that throws things off kilter as everybody gets used to him. And also, you just can't. I don't care how much you're practicing. You can't simulate game conditions and game conditioning. So I think it takes a while for him to get into shape and everybody to get used to playing with him. And then Quade Green was hurt, and he was coming out, and now they're playing. They're playing Gilgeous Alexander and Green together, which they weren't doing. Which they were not doing early in the year, which I think is great because I think they can, depending on who's got it going scoring wise, it gives them a little bit more flexibility. Knox is still a little bit up and down for my taste, but then the final piece, Sam, which I think is which I've kind of been calling for since the start of the year, is I do think that their team identity is really centering around their defense. They have the ability to be a great defensive team. Now, they're young, so most young teams just don't know how to be great defensively because they're all players who've never been asked to play any defense before they got to college. But with their size and their versatility, they should be a solid defensive team. He's mixing in some zone. I'm a zonophile. So I think things are trending in the right direction for Kentucky. I think there's reason for hope there in BBN.
So the next place I want to go to is Duke. I will ask the proverbial question of the day: is Duke back, Seth?
Duke's back. Well, Marvin Bagley's back. Shot 8 for 9. Of course, it was against Syracuse, which is one of the worst offensive teams I've ever seen.
Oh God.
Duke was like 2 for 18, something like that from 3, and still beat them. I mean, beat them bad. And of course, Grayson Allen goes back to shooting 0 for 6 from 3, so that's a concern. But really, with Duke again, they are fully committed to the zone, and they have the ability to be a really, really, really good zone team. I think they're perfect for the zone because not only their length on the back line, but you're talking about Gary Trent is 6'6", Grayson Allen is 6'5", and Duvall is 6'4". That's a big lineup. So that's a lot of arms and legs in that zone. And hey, you want to beat them by making mid-range jumpers? I mean, go for it. And they rebound well out of it. So it's giving them a spark. And then, I think a lot of the usual progressions that you would expect from a young team, a talented team, and a Hall of Fame coach. You're seeing some of those things happening. So, yeah, can they get bounced early? Absolutely, because they're young. And once you put freshmen, this goes for Kentucky as well, and also a team like Alabama, which is real young, where, freshmen, they get into the tournament, and then all of a sudden they look like freshmen again because they've never been in a situation where you lose a game, your season's over. But, in terms of just sheer NBA talent, nobody can touch Duke right now. So, they're back. They're back to being back.
I think that's about all I got for you today, Seth. I'm with you on Duke being back. I mean, they allowed 0.67 points per possession against that awful Syracuse offense. I don't ever want to watch Syracuse play basketball again this season. Like, I'm past it. I'm over it.
You're almost there.
Like, I'm totally over it. I'm through with them this year. Don't want to see them in the NCAA tournament. Don't want to see them in the NIT. Just end the season now. I mean, we could talk about Gonzaga. We could talk about TCU picking up a big win. Arkansas picks up a big win against Alabama in Alabama. Obviously, Arizona falls to Oregon. But I don't know. I think that's basically all we need. Is there anything else that stood out to you?
We talked about them last week. Let me ask you a quick question. Are you ready to make the case that Gonzaga is as good as they were last year?
No, I don't think it's even close, to be honest.
Not close.
Yeah. I mean, that team last year was unbelievable. Like, that team's defense last year was 10 points better per 100 possessions than this team's defense is. This Gonzaga team's really, really good, and I think a lot of teams should be terrified by the fact that they bring back everything but Jonathan Williams and Silas Melson next year, assuming that like Rui and Killian Tilly end up returning and don't go into the NBA draft. But that Gonzaga team last year was one of the best defenses I've ever seen, and I don't know that this Gonzaga team has that has that ability to step up into.
Fair enough. Fun question, though.
It's a fun question because this Gonzaga team is legit a top 5 team now, I think, in the country. Like I will be surprised.
And as you well know, getting to a Final Four isn't necessarily about always being better, right? It's being lucky, good matchups, that type of thing. So they're just quietly piling up wins, and of course the conference is not very good, so you can never fully judge them. But they certainly passed the eye test. BYU was never in that game. That's not easy to go win a game like that at BYU.
They won at San Diego, which is a sneaky good team. They won at BYU this week. They won at St. Mary's, 2 weeks ago. They've gone on the road and beaten all of the good teams in their league now. They're 17-1 in the league. They've won that league outright. It's impressive to me that they are as good as they are. I thought this team would struggle a little bit more within the league. I thought they'd be prone to down games a little bit more than what they were, but they're just so consistent. They're so deep. They're excellent. I think that I will be surprised if I don't have them in my Final Four prediction. I think I'm at that stage.
Okay, we'll see. It'll be fun. 2 weeks from today, man, selection show.
2 weeks from today. Seth, tell the people what we've got going on at the Fieldhouse this week.
Oh,
too much.
I don't even know, man. Ask Godich. We got a lot going on. We got a report coming from we got the good and the bad and everything in between. We got reports coming from Pittsburgh and Wisconsin coming out, and we got some more Kansas stuff coming out. And I'm waiting for Michael Porter Jr. to play. I think that's coming soon. But lots of fun stuff. And for my Monday column, by the way, is going to be part 2 of my enemy lines, where I talk to coaches and grant them anonymity so they can talk about the top teams in the various leagues. So I got ACC, SEC, Pac-12, and the American. So lots of great insights in there for sure.
Let's go on ahead real quick and shout out the Pitt Panthers.
Oh my God! You want to talk about they're actually fun to watch. Like Syracuse is just a bad team that's hard to watch. Pitt is actually fun to watch because they're so bad. I mean, they had, what, 7 points at halftime of their loss to Virginia? I mean, it was 7 or 9. They're so bad they're actually fun to watch.
Right. Yeah. Pitt is like that bad movie that is such a train wreck that you can't look away. Pitt is The Room, basically. The Tommy Wiseau movie that just got made into The Disaster Artist. Pitt is The Room this year. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
That's about all I got for you. Tune in on Wednesday or Thursday. We'll have another episode of the Fieldhouse Podcast. Please go subscribe to The Athletic. And until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.